give a warm welcome to the hosts of The Bride of Alternate Ending.
Hello, ghouls and goblins. I'm just a small town boy, born and raised in South California. And I took a midnight meat train going anywhere. And what I found on the other end was my co-ghost of the Bride of Alternate Ending podcast, which is the horror podcast of the Alternate Ending brand of podcasts. And his name is Tim Brayton. How are you doing today, Tim?
I'm doing good, Brennan. I'm pleased that we've already got the game of putting the title of this motion picture into various pop song contexts, because I've got a few lined up as well.
So. Oh, okay. Not to spoil anything, but I hope we get a Gladys Knight one at some point.
We'll just have to see what happens.
Mm-hmm. But yes, we are closing out our month of digging the horror movie skeletons out of Oscar nominees' closets. Last time we did The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane, which was a terrific kind of 1970s bizarro thriller with Jodie Foster. And this time we're doing Bradley Cooper in 2008's The Midnight Meat Train. This definitely feels more like a skeleton.
Absolutely. I feel like this is we know that Jodie Foster would prefer that Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane not exist, because whatever, not something she needs to be embarrassed of. I think Bradley Cooper would prefer that this one not be remembered as well, and we'll get there. I think that this is definitely the kind of film that one hopes for when one uses the phrase skeleton in the closet. It is grungy, it is tasteless, it is very sort of generic, and requires him to do some pretty dumb things.
Oh boy, it sure does. Should we just get into it? I think that's we're on this midnight meat train. It's barreling down the track, and might as well lean in.
I mean, as I was gonna say, people all over the world join hands, start a meat train.
Ooh, okay, yes, let's do it. Let's join hands. Hello, kitty. But yes, so The Midnight Meat Train, as read to you by Brennan Klein. Once upon a time, there was a midnight meat train. A guy, we get a little horror movie prologue. Speaking of generic, we got a guy who wakes up on a train, he slips on a puddle of blood, and then he gets killed by a big man with a cool silver hammer. He is not Maxwell from the Beatles song, but still pretty cool silver hammer.
It does
go bang bang.
Bang bang, yes.
Upon several people's heads, among other places.
Yes.
And then we cut to Bradley Cooper. I don't know if that's directly. I watched this a couple days ago because I had to prepare.
I believe we first cut to the credit sequence, but then we cut to Bradley Cooper, or at least the title. Maybe there's not a full credit sequence. I can't remember now.
Yeah, I'm sure we get a little something. But basically, Bradley Cooper, he is playing Leon, which is a name that I could not for the life of me attach to Bradley Cooper in my head. Whenever somebody brought up Leon, I was like, who the fuck is Leon? Not the case with his friend. Is it Jurgis or Jurgis? I can't remember now.
I think it's Jurgis. Okay,
it is one of the most unsettling names for a character in a motion picture I've encountered. And poor sorry, I'm skipping ahead slightly, only slightly. But yeah, he has a friend named Jurgis, who is also a friend of Bradley Cooper's girlfriend Maya, played by Leslie Bibb. And they are just saying Jurgis up and down this movie, as if that is something you would call a human being in America in 2008. And I think, it feels Germanic, in which case it would be Jurgis. So it wouldn't. I don't think people are called this. It simply doesn't happen.
Well, I'm wondering if it's one of those things where like it's his surname and you just call the person by their surname.
Maybe.
And his actual name is like, Thadric Jurgis or something like that.
Yeah, he's like, oh, I hate Thadric. Just call me Jurgis.
Exactly.
But yeah, anyway, we don't know. We don't know where this man comes from, what he's about. We do know that he has connections in the art world. So basically Bradley Cooper is this struggling photographer. Jurgis connects him with this kind of horny curator, Susan Hoff, played by Brooke Shields. who is indeed who I would cast as a horny curator, so that does work.
Yeah, no, Brooke Shields is a good, canny bit of casting. And the kind of person who gives you some free gravitas, even though she hasn't been relevant for a long time, but probably comes cheap and has a real name. So good on the casting director for that choice.
Very much, very much. And so she's basically like, your work is pedestrian. You want to capture the heart of the city. You've got to wallow in the muck a little bit. And good news, there's plenty of muck to be wallowed in.
Yeah, she basically encourages him that if he wants his art career to take off, he needs to take snuff photography.
Yeah, pretty much. And he gets pretty close. So basically, there is plenty of muck available because he does live in the Jacob's Ladder city, basically. Where everything is brown and grimy and there are, shafts of light stabbing through places that they don't belong. Although this is 2008 and the Saw movies have come out, so everything is also like a kind of mottled blue-green, shiny slick situation at the same time. And anyway, so he takes a picture of this woman who's being roughed up by this kind of group of gangbanger guys. And he simply can't stand by and take pictures of her being raped, thankfully. So he does step in and stop to protect her, but she does go missing because guess what? After being rescued by him, she took that midnight meat train to Georgia, baby. Mm-hmm. And by Georgia, I mean hell. She died. She got hit in the head with a hammer.
Yep. He made sure she was dead.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, so Bradley Cooper, he realizes there are maybe some little clues as to what happened to her in the pictures that he was taking. And basically, we kind of see him descending into madness and trying to figure out what's going on and getting like really into solving this murder as opposed to becoming a famous photographer. We know who the murderer is. The murderer is a character named Mahogany, played by Vinnie Jones, who, as we know, is the Juggernaut bitch.
Do we ever actually hear the word mahogany said out loud? Because I saw that in the Wikipedia synopsis, and I could not recall that being stated. I just kept thinking of him as the big hulking Vinnie Jones character.
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure that the driver calls him that in the one scene where they talk to each other.
Oh, okay.
Or where the driver talks to him, because Vinnie Jones, does he talk at all? He doesn't, right?
He does talk briefly at the very end.
Okay. Like I said, the minor details have kind of slipped from me on this. But yes, I remember the driver saying his name, because I remember I had looked up the cast list and saw that name, and I was like, haven't heard this yet. And then it did come.
Okay.
But only once.
Gotcha.
So he's this, murderous weirdo. He's always dressed in like a very nice suit, and he carries around this like attache. It's not an attaché case. It's like I don't know, just like a bag with the clip on the top.
Exactly. I don't know what to call that.
Yeah, me neither. But anyway, that's where the bag is wherein he keeps his silver hammer.
His giant hammer, yes.
And basically, we get the sense that he's slipping a little bit. He is succumbing to some sort of gross physical ailment, or these weird kind of like barnacles growing on his chest that he then cuts off and puts in a little jar. And that scene I found to be pretty effective because it's very gross, first of all. It's a physical like makeup effect that they are doing. Mm-hmm. And then he puts them all in the jar and he opens his medicine cabinet and it's full of similar jars. And that I think is more, it is eerie. It is that implication of like, this just keeps happening. And this has been like a long time thing for him.
Exactly. And I think it is at this point worth pointing out that the Midnight Meat Train is based on a story published by Clive Barker in is it the Books of Blood? Is that the name of the anthology?
Yeah. I mean, that is the name of the anthology that he keeps writing in. I don't know if that's specifically the one that this was published in, but that sounds right.
So this is ultimately from the twisted mind, as they say, of Clive Barker, and I think that is mostly visible, and I haven't read the short story, but that is mostly visible in Mahogany's character, who is clearly some sort of like body horror from a bizarre underground society type figure, which is,
Yes.
a big thing in the Clive Barker oeuvre, if you're unfamiliar with
Certainly. He is a Nightbreed.
I was gonna say, feels like Mahogany could have sauntered out of the Nightbreed city with very little adjustments made. So yeah, I do think that there's a sense in which the movie comes more alive when Vinnie Jones is on screen, just because he's the reason we're here. We're not here because we're invested in Bradley Cooper's photography career. Let's be honest. Not even the filmmakers are really invested in Bradley Cooper's filmmaking photography career. Mm-hmm. So
and the Oscars are not invested in his filmmaking career.
Well, they oughtn't to be.
Yes. So yeah, Vinnie Jones. There's something really weird going on with him. We are slowly figuring out he's not acting alone. The conductor of the train is also involved, or at least he is called driver, and he seemed to be the conductor.
Apparently, and it also seems to be a train that sort of exists in like its own little pocket universe of the New York subway system.
Yeah, like it kind of gets diverted into this weirdly CGI tunnel. In that, well, I think that like the train is CGI in those shots. It looks gross to me. I don't like it.
This film's relationship to CGI is very 2008.
Oh, it really is, and I wish it wasn't.
It's right about the time when people are starting to feel comfortable using CGI for lots of stuff rather than just the stuff you need to use CGI for, and sometimes that works out better for this film than others. is what I will say at this moment in time.
Okay, we will get to it because that is a big part of what is kind of operating at the center of this movie. But yeah, so we get the sense that there's a more expansive kind of cult going on. We do start to get the sense that there is a cop who's investigating the murder that Bradley Cooper has brought evidence for. And it's like, oh, she might be involved too. She might be kind of stonewalling him.
She seems exactly to be more sort of dismissing evidence from a perspective of I don't want to hear it than from a you're just a silly old photographer. Who cares what you think?
Yes. So basically, I don't know. He's investigating this murder. He's becoming increasingly disconnected from his art and from his girlfriend, played by Leslie Bibb. And
which, to be fair, neither his art nor his girlfriend are very good, so it doesn't feel like that's a terrible loss.
No, certainly not. And he's just trying to plumb the mystery of the Midnight Meat Train, and he just kind of runs around in circles for a long time. And then in the last 10 minutes, we learn what the Midnight Meat Train is all about, essentially. Exactly. Yeah. Should we start with the CGI? We already kind of...
I mean, CGI is as good a place as any to start with. It's also probably the place where you and I are going to come closest to being on, I think, exactly the same page.
Okay. Yeah, I should hope so. Yeah, because you... I mean, obviously, one thing that always kind of taints our conversations a little bit is I see your Letterboxd review. You see mine, usually. So I know you gave this twice as many stars as I did.
I liked this movie 2 times as much as you did. That is, and almost more than that. If you read the review, I was waffling on maybe even going slightly higher. I will say, to that end, there are 2 cuts of this film. I think there are actually 4 cuts of this film, but there's only 2 available to North Americans. Which cut did you see?
I saw the theatrical cut, just like you did.
So did I. I didn't realize until I was done watching it that I had potentially a different option. So I feel like I cheated myself out of some gore.
I feel like I don't think the gore would have been very good in the unrated version. So I don't feel like I missed out on that much.
Because it would have been CGI gore.
Exactly. Really absurdly bad CGI.
And this gets us back to the the conversation about CGI. There is still, in the year of our Lord 2024, where you and I now live, filmmakers are using CGI blood in their slasher movies and other horror films as if that's okay. Mm-hmm. And I am tempted to say there are 0 examples of good CGI blood And maybe you'll come up with a counter argument. I'm certainly willing to hear that. But
my single counter argument would be there's potentially a chance that we have seen CGI blood that we did not recognize as CGI blood, in which case it did work.
That's fair. But
yeah.
Certainly there's a ton of conspicuously bad CGI blood. And I'm talking about there's conspicuously bad CGI blood in like 2021, 2022. This is
Absolutely.
2008. So the conspicuously bad CGI blood isn't so much conspicuously bad as it is Who Framed Roger Rabbit-esque. And that it doesn't even necessarily seem like the CGI was meant to exist in the same corporeal reality as the actual footage.
I am deeply offended by this insinuation because, first of all, Roger Rabbit cartoons are meant to and do exist in the physical universe.
Okay, that's literally the text of the Roger Rabbit cartoons, yes.
And that movie was made by Robert Zemeckis at the height of his powers and is consistently integrating those universes in a way that I think is very visually satisfying and never uncanny and gross like this is.
I was more trying to find a fancy way of saying it looks like a goddamn cartoon.
Yes. It sure does. I don't think it works at all. And I know we disagree on that, but continue.
I don't think we disagree in that I also don't think it works. I am willing to say that we're far enough away from 2008 that I found it charming more than film breaking.
Okay, I can understand that approach, because I feel like that. I feel like that with so many time capsule movies. But I think first of all, there's a couple things. I guess there's a couple reasons it didn't work for me. First of all, is that I think the movie did a reasonably solid job of building up its first like 10 or 15 minutes, and then you don't see the depths of the CGI gore until that model gets hit in the head with the hammer and her head turns into a little cartoon that kind of just crumples, and that's just not right. And that was a film breaking moment for me. And then everything that came after, I found it harder and harder to care about because I was just like, oh God, is the next thing I'm going to see something at that level?
The reason I think I'm a little bit less taken out of the film by it than you, I feel like by the time we see the model's head get replaced by a cartoon character, which you're not wrong, by that point we had already seen Ted Raimi's eye pop out, correct?
No, that comes after that.
That comes after that?
Yeah, because that is a scene that is just shoehorned in out of nowhere.
Okay.
And I'm like, do I know these people? Like for like 30 seconds, I was trying to figure out if that was Jurgis and Leslie Bibb on the train because we had just seen them, and I was like, "There's no reason for me to be watching these people otherwise." It was a real Friday the 13th Part 5. Like, here are some characters that are about to get killed.
That's very true. Well, the reason I start with that is because I did find the eye popping to be the right kind of silly looking.
I don't necessarily disagree with that because I do feel that way about physical effects, practical effects that are at that kind of level. But that did come after, and I was already kind of sour against
that's fair. Ironically, I've watched this film more recently than you have, and I feel like it is just as melty in my brain as it is in yours. But there's just no two ways about it. The CGI is working at cross purposes to everything else that is working in this film. And that's a problem. That just is a problem. And that's all I have to say. I'm not even going to try to defend it. It's bad. It's bad CGI. Yeah. It's bad CGI that I found enjoyably bad.
Yeah, and that's just a matter of taste, and I can totally understand that. It's not in this case for me.
Yeah, I'm certainly not going to try to say that it is augmenting the film. It's more just that I was perhaps in an expansive enough mood for dumb, cheesy bullshit, which is weird because everything else I'm going to say in defense of this movie
Midnight Meat Train
is arguing that it is neither dumb, nor cheesy
bullshit movie,
cheesy.
at least in like a B movie kind of way. It is dumb, cheesy bullshit for sure, but it's kind of
the
darker
CGI
and taking itself a little more seriously,
really
and then the CGI just not adopting that same tone.
What was that?
The CGI is just not adopting the same tone that the rest of the movie is taking.
It's really not. It's really, really not.
But yeah, and I think so we are dealing with director Kitamura Ryuhei, and I think he is crafting some interesting images in the rest of the movie. I think the first shot where we see Bradley Cooper genuinely blew me away. It is a time-lapse shot of a city street of all the cars kind of zooming around, and then he steps into frame like in close-up, in slow motion, and then like the kind of timing of the frame completely changes while he's taking a photograph. And I was like, hell yeah, I'm ready for this movie. And there are quite a few other images like that I found to be interesting, but then the CGI just completely, T-bones that.
Sure. I think we can agree on one thing, is that Kitamura is definitely putting together some cool looking shots. This is the third Kitamura film I've seen, the first one not in Japanese. I know from your Letterboxd post that you have seen and disliked Godzilla Final Wars.
Oh yeah, I find that movie to be like mainlining Pixie Sticks. It is too much for me. It is chaos. Incarnate.
It is chaos incarnate. I would certainly not call it one of my favorite Godzilla films. I think it needs to be shorter. It was, at the time it came out, the longest Godzilla film, and I have not been disabused of my belief in the last 20 years that Godzilla films need to be under 2 hours long. I'm looking at you, Monsterverse. But
oh, Jesus.
Although, to be fair, only one Godzilla film has been over 2 hours long. It was murderous, but it was only the one. I've also seen Versus, which I believe was his first film. And Versus is kind of, I think, maybe the specific film that makes me feel not so awful about what this film's CGI is doing. That is this weird sort of like Fulci-esque Portal to Hell movie that's also like over-the-top action cinema. And the thing where you're going to have kind of real dopey violence sutured into very serious glum imagery is sort of at play there as well. It's better there. It works better there for sure. But it feels enough like a strategy that I think I can see that it's a choice he's making potentially, even though I don't think it's a choice that's panning out in this case. That being said, getting back to the solid ground where I feel comfortable defending this movie, there are, I would say, quite a few very, very cool images in here, as long as the CGI gore is being kept out, or in some cases not just CGI gore. You've already mentioned the CGI train, which looks very, very silly, although I will say the non-gore CGI tended to leave me in the film more than the gore did, which pretty consistently reminded me that I was watching a movie from 2008.
Yes. And I think to your point about Versus compared to this movie, Versus, I think that Midnight Meat Train, it might have held together more if it was in Japanese, at least from an English-speaking perspective, because we do tend to give like a subconscious pass to certain things that don't quite click for us in international features.
Absolutely, we do.
So maybe that is a sensibility that he brought, and it just doesn't feel like it works for a movie that is. It's a mid-budget movie, certainly by what that standard would have been at the time. But it's like a Hollywood movie. And it doesn't feel right to have something so janky in it and so off kilter. And this movie cost $15 million.
Did it now?
according to the reported budgets that I could find. And it was
That's not on screen.
no, no.
I think I just was assuming this was like a little $2 million production.
No, like I said, I wouldn't bet my firstborn on that, even though I don't intend to have kids. But I wouldn't bet the farm on that being true. But that is the reported budget that I could find in multiple places, and that's the only number that's attached to this movie.
Okay, I see. I will say that my quote unquote research for this film was basically just the Wikipedia page, which does not have a production budget number listed. So I just was trying to go off of what my gut told me. It does give me the fun fact that apparently the entirety of this film's theatrical release in the United States was in second-run dollar theaters.
Yes, that is true.
Which is a shabby thing to do to any movie, but also does speak to the degree to which this feels like a movie that costs $15 million, or not. It feels that way, perhaps.
Yeah, my God. Yeah, they were apparently there was kind of a regime change, and the new exec was like, "What the fuck is this? Get this out of my sight," basically.
That happens. That for sure happens.
And I'm inclined to trust his taste. Yeah, no, big ol' mess for me. Anyway, God. We were talking about the aesthetic. Were there other moments that you felt like did like really sing for you, other than like? Did the shot that I talked about mean anything to you?
Oh,
were you impressed by that?
I thought it was super cool. Again, like I think a lot of this movie to me operates less at the level of. I shouldn't just frame it that way. This movie operates to me at the level of that was cool, that was atmospheric, that was gross. It's not like art. Unlike Bradley Cooper's photography, it does not speak to the human condition, which is kind of a bummer because I think that's what Clive Barker's fiction in general that I have read does do, is kind of get at something subterranean in our psyches. And even though this is set in a subterranean environment, it's just not that. It's and again, I don't know what changes this has made to the source material. My sense is not that Clive Barker hates this film. Which is certainly, he makes it known when he hates the films based on his writing. So I'll assume it's at least in the neighborhood of what he wrote. And it feels a little schlocky. It feels a little like, what if we did darker, edgier J-horror mimic in some ways?
Oh, totally.
So it's not really getting at that sort of psychologically uncomfortable thing that Clive Barker can do. It's really just kind of topping out at what if there was a world below our own and that world was super gross and violent. Which isn't nothing, but it's not a lot. But so what I do like about the film really does, I think, have a lot to do with this kind of slickness and style and sort of more generally than the specific shot that you've touched on, I would say I think certain things just kind of work all the time, always. And one of the things that work is set the camera up in a train car, pointing down the length of the train car at someone walking towards the camera. Like I think that's a hack. Like there are just certain images that have to work, and in this case you get free composition from being inside a train car, because it's like, well, it's already deep, it's already staging itself along the z-axis, you already get really nice depth of field, and this is a movie that has train in the title, so there's just lots and lots and lots of shots inside train cars, and I'm there for that, especially when the person walking towards me in deep focus is a big old hulking hammer wielding man mountain like Vinnie Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when he's like pushing aside corpses to conduct that walk.
Yes. Okay. So What's your experience of Vinnie Jones? Because I only know him from portraying the Juggernaut bitch. So I'm not that familiar with him. But do you like him from other things?
I don't know that one necessarily likes Vinnie Jones. He just shows up in things. I'm pulling up his filmography right now because I definitely have seen him more than that.
Yeah, presumably Guy Ritchie movies or Guy Ritchie ripoffs, I would imagine.
The first two Guy Ritchie movies for sure. Snatch, I think, is kind of the one that got him the Juggernaut role. Insofar as anything got him the role other than just being a big fucking guy. So he's in stuff. I don't think there's anything he's in where it's like, oh, this is the one where Vinnie Jones is making his Oscar play. He's simply not that kind of actor. But he's got, like, I think we need guys who look scary as long as they're just hulking and not trying to deliver lines of dialogue. And this movie has the good sense to give him, I believe, one word of dialogue.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So would I be inclined to say I seek out movies because Vinnie Jones is in them? Christ, no. But he's bulky, and he looks mean, and that is the limitations that this film is happy to work within, I think.
Yeah, well, that's great, and you got to work to your strengths. And I will say, kind of circling back a tiny bit on what you were saying about this movie not necessarily feeling Clive Barker-y, except in certain moments. I do think there's one moment with Leslie Bibb's character that does feel Clive Barker-y also. Well, first of all, this poor woman, she is just written as an object to be slammed against various flat surfaces in different contexts. But there is a pretty terrifying scene where she's trying to pull Bradley Cooper out of his madness, and she's like, please take pictures of something that you love. And so he's like, okay, I'll take pictures of you. And she's kind of like stripping and walking down the hallway while he's taking pictures of her and having flashbacks of murder and torture and mayhem. And he's like getting more and more unhinged, and she's getting more and more naked and terrified. And that is a Clive Barker-ass scene right there.
That is a Clive Barker-ass scene. That scene comes so close to working, and if it didn't have that just howlingly bad line that you quoted, basically, I would probably have been on board with that scene more than I was. It is introduced, because not only does she say, take photographs of something you love, there's like some sort of weird line about like, make me happy, but also make you happy. I forget the exact line of dialogue. But it's
yeah, that is earlier because she is constantly trying to fuck Bradley Cooper.
Okay, I think that I was just so. She's sort of the opposite of Vinnie Jones for me. I found Leslie Bibb's screen presence to be just kind of such a Teflon thing that my eyes just kept gliding right off of. Her scenes are kind of combining themselves into my brain, but certainly the dialogue setting up anything she does is cheesy in a way that. It gets back to the CGI thing. I think parts of this movie want to be cheesier than they are, and whether that's that Kitamura doesn't know how to do cheesiness in a Hollywood context, or if it's just that you can't cheesy up Clive Barker, or if the cheesiness is really just people being bad at their jobs, I can't say. But she's a corny character, and it's a corny plot. And even though that sex scene is kind of terrifyingly, like, violence-tinged, I think the movie hadn't earned the sex scene for me, is I guess maybe how I feel about it.
No, I think that's fair.
The scene is good. The scene is good. It has a Barker-esque energy. I just don't know that it got set up right.
Yeah, well, I mean, because Maya's, like I said, not a character. She is just this, like, absurdly supportive girlfriend who then turns into a, how could you do this, like a nagging girlfriend, and then back into a supportive girlfriend, and then, of course, she, spoiler alert, gets murdered, because that's what she's in this movie to do. Mm-hmm. I'm honestly shocked, if I recall correctly, because I fully expected there to be a scene where she's like, well, I have to, take this into my own hands and get on the midnight meat train to go somewhere to investigate. And then he will, like, see the doors closing. And he's like, no, my girlfriend, she's on the midnight meat train. And that didn't happen in that way.
Correct.
It's the only thing. Well, it's one of the only two things in that final sequence that are not entirely predictable. Since we're here, should we talk about it?
Probably. I'm trying to figure out what the other thing is that you have in mind that's not entirely predictable.
Well, I mean, okay, so this is something that's already been slightly revealed, I guess, but the fact that there are like that the Midnight Meat Train is just feeding these weird little goblin monsters.
I guess that's fair. I was not expecting that.
Yeah. Because it's obviously a cult that is gathering bodies for some reason. And then the reason is the little goblin monsters that live in that kind of underground world you were talking about. And if they're not fed, question mark, question mark, question mark. It's definitely when seeing them, it does not inspire the kind of Lovecraftian awe that it might have.
I could not figure out, maybe you have thoughts on this, I could not figure out if what we were seeing was Kitamura mistakenly thinking that he was putting enough light on his creatures to have them be scary rather than just like silhouettes, or if it was Kitamura correctly realizing that his creatures looked like shit and he needed to keep them out of direct lighting. Because that was the vibe. It was definitely one of those like 50s movies, like one of those 50s movies where you have to do everything you can to keep the monster suit off camera for as long as possible. Mm-hmm. But I do wonder if he thought he was being atmospheric.
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm feeling atmospheric. I feel like I got one or two glimpses enough of like to get the vibe of what the monsters looked like. But yeah, they're definitely shunted off screen for the most part.
I will say that I've seen plot synopses referring to them as reptilian, and I'm like, okay, I don't know where you got that from necessarily.
No, I mean they're kind of slimy, I guess.
They got teeth, they got claws. Lots of things got teeth and claws, though.
Yeah, they seemed kind of like they're like humanoid kind of baby monsters. So like the fair-haired child from that Masters of Horror episode, or like kind of like the ghost kid from Devil's Backbone if he was a monster. I don't know, not really. Okay, here's a more accurate example: the leprechaun from Leprechaun Origins.
Yeah, that feels. I can get behind calling these little leprechaun monsters.
Yeah,
that works for me.
But yeah, no, that just doesn't work for me, and I'm sure it's great in the short story.
That's the thing. I feel like the short story is probably better at explaining why they are terrifying. A, because you can't see them. B, because it feels like this was an afterthought in the movie, and I can't imagine it's an afterthought in the short story.
Yeah. It's probably a late reveal in the short story, but not an afterthought.
And like as you said, it's really all in the last 10 minutes. I feel it needed to be, say, in the last 15 minutes. Maybe would have gotten me where I needed to be.
Yeah, and then of course the thing I was kind of hinting at, the very predictable ending of like, of course, because we get the sense that Vinnie Jones is fading in his ability to become or to be the Midnight Meat Train murderer, and then obviously Bradley Cooper, even though his character arc is not leading him there properly in the script, he's obviously going to take over. And then there's that long final scene where they're really holding off on showing us the face of...
Just absolutely indecent, because not only do we know from narrative tropes that he's going to take over, we know from the dialogue that he's going to take over. Like the conductor basically says as much to him in the scene prior to that, and then we cut to the epilogue, 2 scenes where we don't see his face until the very end. It's like, but who could it conceivably be other than Bradley Cooper?
Yeah, no one else is even alive that could fill out a suit like that, at least.
Right.
Yeah, no, it delivers nothing. It's not a big shock reveal. This is the exact ending I predicted within the first 20 minutes of the movie. That's just where this movie goes.
And I will say, I like the scene in the subway where we meet the goblin creatures. Even though it's a tired old trope, I do like the scene where Bradley Cooper's tongue gets ripped out and he watches his girlfriend getting carved apart and he's horrified. That epilogue, though, is just a fucking dead scene. Those 2 parts of the epilogue just don't work. They kill the movie's momentum right at the end. Never a good feeling.
No, not at all. I don't understand why it had to happen that way. But okay, was there anything else that you felt worked for you in this movie.
Absolutely, and it is something that we have touched on in only the briefest respect, and it sounds like it was specifically something that did not work for you.
Ooh.
I really liked the cinematography in this movie a ton.
Oh, I mean, well, like I said, I am inclined to agree with you. I am both allergic to the Jacob's Ladder Dingy City aesthetic and the kind of sheeny shiny Saw aesthetic, but I thought there were a lot of shots that really worked. But yeah, tell me about what you liked.
So I went through a phase of being allergic to the Saw shiny city. There we go. I went through a phase of being allergic to that look, but I have now grown nostalgic for it because nostalgia is the mind killer. And here we are. It's like, oh, remember when every movie looked like a Korn video? Those were good days. So the kind of like grotty, shiny, everything is wrapped in filthy chrome look that this movie has did work for me. This is a grainy fucking movie. And I think that's part of it as well. It's like, God, remember film grain? I remember film grain. So I really love just how gross it feels. It feels like this is a movie that despises New York, even though it was shot in Los Angeles. Maybe this was its way of trying to overcompensate and make Los Angeles look more New Yorky by just coating it in like Vaseline and shit. But really, really dug just how swimmy the grain was, and everything just felt coated in like a sheen of awful. And so much of this movie is in dark spaces, and it's like it's willing to just let those dark spaces be completely opaque, but not like in an underlit way, more of a like you just can't see down there because you're not supposed to be there, and like it's rejecting your ability to sort of make visual sense of it. So I dug all that. I will say this movie was shot by Jonathan Sela, who is someone whose career really, really just goes up and down for me. Probably most notably in the good category, he shot the first John Wick.
Okay.
Also shot Atomic Blonde, and out because of John Wick. Shot both of these movies, I suspect, because David Leitch met him, presumably, on the set of The Midnight Meat Train when David Leitch was the stunt coordinator. But then, on the other hand, he also shot, say, A Good Day to Die Hard and Transformers The Last Night, the latter of which just looks like absolute digital paste. So not necessarily someone who I just automatically say, oh, if he shot it, it must look good. But when he's on, he's on. I do think he's on in this case. I really, really liked just how corroded and slick and sweaty everything looked.
Yeah, I hear that. And one thing I will say is that, so while they're going for the Saw visual aesthetic in a lot of ways, it does avoid the music video choppy editing that the Saw movies did.
100%.
We are holding on these shots. We are getting a chance to spend time with these images. And I think that is that was very refreshing to me to experience in this era of movie.
Yeah, which
and
I can't even credit to Kitamura because I don't recall either of the Japanese films of his I've seen necessarily having that be a conspicuous strength.
Yeah, I mean, well, Godzilla Final Wars is definitely, it is cut to shit. That is like I said, it is a chaos movie. It is edited with a Cuisinart, so he's definitely, there's a different thing going on. So I don't know who's responsible, but I'm happy that it is going on.
Sure.
But yeah, so one thing I will say about, the LA, New York situation, this is kind of in any city. Like, they're not specifically saying what city it's in. That, at least as far as I could tell, do they say New York?
I think those are specifically New York trains.
That makes sense. But here's the thing. When he's looking at security camera footage of the woman getting roughed up by the gangsters, it says that they're at the Beale Street station.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know. I don't even know if Memphis has a subway system in that way. But it's entirely possible that this takes place in Memphis.
That would be fascinating. I think for me, I just made the leap, A, because of the design of the trains, and B, any story about the unknowable catacombs of the subway, just, it feels like it is in New York, because that's the city that has unknowable catacombs in its subway system.
Yeah, I mean, here in LA, we barely have a subway system. You know, it's not the same thing.
I've ridden on your subway system in LA, as a matter of fact.
No, yeah, and that's why I said barely. We don't have that kind of interconnected.
Exactly. You don't have what New York has, where it feels like it's a subway on top of a subway on top of a subway.
No,
and there's tunnels that people haven't been in for like 150 years.
Yeah, exactly. And we do have a subway system, but I think it covers about 1/8 of the city underground, and the rest is above ground, and that only covers about a third. Our train system sucks.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, yeah. So this is kind of in any city, but the Beale Street thing really threw me off.
Interesting. I don't think it was shot anywhere other than LA. Now I'm wondering if they did pick a photography in Memphis for some reason.
Well, I don't think so. I mean, it was just like a little that is what the like Chiron on the video said. It wasn't like an incidental thing. But it said like 138th / Beale Street stop, like on the little digital display of the camera.
Gotcha.
Or something like that. I don't remember the number of the cross street. But yeah, so that was bizarre. But you know, there are beautiful shots. There's one that I think you'll see immediately if you look up this movie on IMDb, but it's a shot where Bradley Cooper's looking up the microfiche, and the text of the article that he's reading is kind of displaying on his face.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really cool shot. I think there are plenty of shots like that are really pretty, separate from the overarching kind of just aesthetic grubbiness.
Yeah, it's definitely, you know, as I said earlier, like, this is a movie that has cool shots. It's a movie that very rarely has shots that sort of unlock the story. I just don't think the story's interesting, really. Like, it's not that it's bad, it's that it's every other fucking story. It's like, oh, the photographer gets obsessed with what he's seeing in his photograph, so he's going to start exploring a crime, and he's going to get in too deep. Gee, that's new. Like,
yeah, it's Jacob's Ladder, it's Blow Up, it's a lot of different things.
It's really generic in a way that make me wonder what could possibly be the reason that Clive Barker wrote this story, because I have a hard time believing that in this case the secret is that there's an underground community of lizard people. Doesn't feel like it moves the needle enough for it to have captured the attention of someone like Clive Barker. So I assume there's more to this than the story. I don't know. The film's story is pretty scrawny, but I don't mind that necessarily, because it does mean that the filmmaking just sort of gets to ignore the story and go nuts, and it does so.
Yeah, it sure does. And isn't that nice for it? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I really have anything else to say about this movie. I mean, the aesthetic of the kind of general scenes just didn't really work for me, just on a personal level. And like I said, the story's so generic. And then there's just a lot of stuff that just doesn't really make any goddamn sense. And there's a very weird scene where Brooke Shields looks at his photos and she's like, whoa. And he's like, you don't strike me as the type of person to say whoa. And she's like, well, I haven't said it since high school. I'm like, what do you mean? It just... Is that a slang that fell out of use in 2008? It just didn't seem like a weird word to me.
That is a weirdly written scene, for sure. No defending that scene.
There's just anytime a woman is on screen, they forget what the hell they're doing.
I do feel we have one thing that needs to be chatted about, though.
Okay.
Given the context in which we're watching this film, what did you think about Mr. Bradley Cooper?
Oh yeah, of course. That's the reason we're doing this. Honestly, he just felt very milquetoast to me. He wasn't making a huge impression on me in this movie.
This is like his first leading man role. It is the film he was in directly prior to, not The Happening, The Hangover, which was sort of his big like breakout role as a movie star. So it comes at a pretty big point in his career. So presumably people saw this and were like, I like that Bradley Cooper. I want more of that in my life. Now, I am not a Bradley Cooper fan, really. I've never been particularly excited by his performances, and this is not going to change that. But I'm going to put it right out there. I think he's so much better in this film than he is in Maestro.
I have not yet seen Maestro, so I can't second that, but I believe you.
I think his performance in Maestro is quite bad. Frankly.
That strikes me as correct. I mean, yeah, he's just kind of like I don't know, Bradley Cooper's never quite hit right for me either. He's like hot but not in a way that I find particularly interesting. And he's been in a lot of things like this or like Limitless where you're just like you're not really tasked with having to act at all.
Yep. I will say go ahead.
I was just gonna say I like him when he's funny occasionally. I think he's pretty good in Wet Hot American Summer and in his supporting role in Wedding Crashers. But yeah, I think a little of him can go a long way.
I will say in terms of his hotness, he does have the thing. I think hot people are not good movie stars. I think people who are hot looking in a weird way are good movie stars. And he is hot in a weird way. Because he has a weirdly short forehead, and his eyes seem too big, and his teeth seem a little nubby.
Okay. I do get that. Yeah, maybe he's not generic hot in like a WB kind of way.
This is exactly my thing. Like there's a certain oddness to the shape of his face. Like cut off his head, the rest of his body's generically hot, but his face is kind of slightly weird, and I like that. That being said, I don't think he's a terribly exciting actor. I think he's good at playing the kind of like escalating crazy in this role, which is again enough for me to say this is definitely better than what he's doing in Maestro, which he's become very Oscar hungry. He fucking wants that statue, and as is true of so many actors when they fucking want that statue, he's just he's kind of going for every like stupid acting trick that he can scrounge up, and in this case it was accent and prosthetic for Maestro.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the thing. He's directing himself in that, which can lead to some very miscalibrated performances.
Indeed.
You've got to kill your darlings, but if your darling is yourself, that's a really tough call to make.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, I don't disagree. Like I said, I think he was the driving force. I mean, well, honestly, he and Leslie Bibb were the driving force of that scene that I particularly liked, where she's like the terror stripping. But I don't know. I wouldn't say. I think you could have put kind of anybody in this role.
I agree. I don't think I think he's doing a fine job with a simple role. I don't think he's doing anything that you would have only been able to get from Bradley Cooper.
Yeah. Which is fine. That's the kind of movie that this is. It's generic, and I think in your case, pleasingly generic, and in my case, not so much. But it's just it is doing largely what it says on the tin if you're watching a movie from 2008 called The Midnight Meat Train.
Exactly.
And the meat is in red on the poster, the font for the word meat.
Which, as it should be. Oh, we didn't even talk about how the character is a vegetarian. That's supposed to be a plot arc.
It is, and then he's not as he loses his grip on reality or whatever, and he's embodying the butcher or whatever.
Exactly.
Who could care? That was a weird, and that diner looked disgusting. Also, that was the point.
That's the thing. I would not want to have my tofu cooked in that diner. No. I would not pick a fight with the diner owner to cook my tofu there, just because that's the diner that I was in.
Yeah, horrible. They really took Greasy Spoon seriously.
Yes.
Anyway, anything else about this? It's a pretty kind of ramshackle, slim affair. Like, how much left is there?
I don't think there's anything I have left. No.
Okay, since we're tapped out on the Midnight Meat Train, let's move on. We've reached the end of the line. Any last train jokes you wanted to get in there?
Let the midnight meat train shine its ever-loving light on me.
Ooh, okay. And yeah, we did go off the rails on a crazy midnight meat train. But yes, thank you so much for bearing with us through this movie, I suppose. It is always nice when we don't agree on a movie, because we don't always have those.
It gets the conversation moving a little bit further ahead than when we have like the same 6 points to make. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so that's going to conclude our Oscar Skeletons month. And next time you can, as we are following a suggestion, a command from Oscar level patron Gavin McDowell. Next month we'll be covering movies as seen on MST3K. So if you're on the Patreon, make sure to keep an eye out for the poll to select the first movie that we cover in March. But until then, you can find more. You can find more podcast reviews and everything on alternateending.com. Reviews have been a little slow right now. I did just start a Jane Austen Hallmark 4-part series, so you can keep an eye on.
Very, very excited to catch up with those reviews.
Thank you. Yeah, you can keep an eye on my descent into madness. Leading into their first ever period piece drama, adapting Sense and Sensibility.
Weird to me that they've never done a period piece before, but I'm excited.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be something. But yeah, so keep an eye out for that on the site, and also keep an eye out. Probably a year and a half from now, Zombies 4 is going into production later this month, everyone. So this is the Zombies 4 newscast. Your latest breaking. Milo Manheim and Meg Donnelly are returning. They're also executive producing. It's gonna be great. There's a character whose name starts with V, so vampires might be involved. It is exciting news. Also, the girl who plays Eliza the zombie, she is confirmed to come back. I don't know if she will also be in her own little pod, just kind of calling in.
Once again, be on a laptop for the entire movie.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited. It's a road trip. It's gonna be something. Anyway, that's that on that. Thanks so much for listening. Bye, everybody.
She ate